Again, YouTube. We are back again working on the Mazda CX7. Today we're going to be replacing rotors, pads, and a shock. So I'll show you what tools you're going to need. We'll start off with the important stuff. We've got our gloves. I'm wearing my goggles. We got our jack stand. We've got our jack. You're going to need a C-clamp. I'm using a 5-inch. Flashlight is a good idea. There are slip locks, flathead screwdriver. You're also going to need a 14mm wrench, a 17mm wrench, a 14mm socket, a 17mm socket, a 19mm socket, and a 13/16mm socket. In addition to that, you'll also need, dropping stuff, a number 5 Allen. You can use a regular Allen. I'm using this because it's going to make taking the shock apart a lot easier. You'll see later. And you're going to need a number 3 Phillips. This is important for, if you haven't done this before, there are 2 Phillips screws holding the rotor to the bearing and hub assembly. I don't think those are on there still. I took them off last time because I had to drill them out. But if yours hasn't been apart, you'll need this. If yours doesn't come apart, you'll need a drill and a drill bit to drill them out. So, in addition to that, you'll obviously need your new parts. Brake cleaner, we have a new shock, we have a new set of pads, and a brand new rotor. So to start everything, I'm going to take off the tire. Well, I'm going to jack it up, put the stand under there, and then we'll take the tire off and we'll go from there. Alright, I'll be back in a flash. Alright, now that we got the tire off, you can see how crusty these rotors are. They're pretty well cooked, and you can see that right there and right there would have been a screw in there, a Phillips, but they're not, because I think that these rotors didn't come with the hole drilled in them for it to thread into. Plus I had to drill them out of the old one. So, the next thing we're going to want to do is, you got a little pin right here. I'm going to try and do this. Sorry for the bad lighting, you guys. So you got to take this guy off with your pliers, and then there's 4 bolts on your caliper. You got one on the top here. That's a 14 mil, and the one below it is a 17 mil. Now there's 2 at the top, and there's 2 at the bottom. You want to take the 14 mils, loosen those out about a 1/4 inch both, but take the 17 all the way out, and then take the entire thing off as an assembly. So I'm going to take those bolts off, and then I'm going to take the this guy here off, and then we'll go from there. Alright, I'll be back in a minute. Alright, we have the caliper off. I have stuck the caliper right there. It fits there quite nicely, and it'll just stay there for a little while. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take off the rotor, and then I'll show you how to remove the strut. Right, now that the rotor is off, you can see here, that is the lower support bolt for the strut here. It's a 17mm. You have to access it from the back side. The side you can see here is actually welded to the that piece of steel there, so it does not turn. You know, if yours is really dirty, you're going to want to maybe take a wire brush and clean up those threads real good. Maybe hit it with a little bit of penetrating oil. Deep creep is pretty good. These ones have been off. They're anti-seized. I know they'll come off pretty easily. So what we got to do is I'm using basic tools. I didn't bring all my good stuff. I wish I had my ratcheting wrenches with me, but I don't. So I've got the 17mm on the back there, and what I'm going to do is take the bolt out from the back, and then from the inside of the vehicle have a little access hatch. Now, this is what you need the flathead screwdriver for. There is a little slot right here at the top. Pop that off just like that. Now, on the inside here, you can see that there are 3 bolts. You only need to take the 2 on the left with the crown tops. Don't worry about the center one, or the ones on the left and the right. The center one is for once it's out. Those are both 14mm, and they should come out very easily. So I'm going to take all of that out, and then I will show you what to do next. Alright, so now that this bolt is out, and the 2 bolts on the inside at the top here are out, we're gonna pull this down like this. All right, once it's pulled down, I'm gonna have to use my other hand and put the camera down. I want you to, while it's being squeezed together, because it will go back up, see, if I let it go, lift the bottom out of the assembly. All right, so I'm gonna do that, and then we'll be right back. There you have it, it's out. Just like that. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this guy apart. So what you're gonna need is you're gonna need that Allen key and 14mm for the top here, and I'll show you what to do. So a quick explanation. If you try to take it off the way it is like this, it just spins on the thing there, see? So what we do is on the end here, you can see there's a slot for the Allen to fit in. Pop that guy in there like that, and then you can use that to hold the center shaft, the threaded portion, stationary while you use the wrench to remove the bolt. Sorry, nuts and bolts. I'm born nuts. So take the nut off, and then I'll show you what to do next. But before that, as you take this apart, lay the parts out, because there's some washers and a rubber cushion in here. Lay them out in the order they need to go back in. That way there's no confusion as to how to put it back together. So for reference, this is how it all came apart. You've got the gas cylinder, you've got a rubber stopper, you've got a washer. I'm going to mention that this is directional. You'll notice one side is flat, one side is beveled. You want the bevel going down into the top of this. So when you reassemble it, you want it like this, not like this. Next you have the dust protector, a washer, you have the mounting hardware, another washer, and the nut. So we will grab the new one, which is just over here. Pick that guy up. So these things come with a replacement nut, different size. Makes it a pain in the ass. Ditch that. If your old one's in good condition, reuse it. Pull this pin out, and she'll expand. Very phallic, I know. And then what we do, lay this down. First piece to go on is the rubber stopper. Next, remember this down like this, on like that. It's stopped right here. Next, dust cover, like this. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, but I'll do my best here. Like that. Next up, you got your washer. That one's not directional. Then we have the mounting hardware. Then we have the washer. And then we have the nut. Remember, I'm reusing the factory nut because it's the 14mm. That just, I don't like, this is not a 14mm. You can tell by looking at it. I don't know what it is. But if you start using aftermarket parts and you've got metric and standard in the same vehicle, I just hate that. It's a pet peeve of mine. It drives me nuts. Alright, so you want to tighten this down. I'm not sure on the torque spec for that, but I know it bottoms out eventually on the threads there, so I'm just going to do that. That's how it was before. So I'll put that back together, and then I will pop this guy back in, and we will go to the next step. Alright, as you can see, it's back in. I did find a torque spec sheet online and was able to torque that bad boy to the proper spec, top and bottom. I'm not going to tell you what the torque specs are because I found them on a post online, and if they're wrong and your vehicle explodes, I don't want to be liable. So you can just put CX7 Mazda torque specs into Google and it'll spit you out a bunch of answers. I went with one on a Mazda forum that I cross-referenced with a torque spec PDF I found in Google Images. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unwrap this, clean it with some brake cleaner, make sure, because these come pre-packaged with a film of oil on them to keep them from rusting when they come over here from China. So I'll get that all cleaned up, and then we'll just stick that right on there. And then I'll show you how to put the new brake pads in your caliper. These may look clean, but I've got a nice clean piece of paper towel here. Yeah, most of that's metal dust from the machining process, but there is oil on there as well. Now make sure you do both sides when you do this. And the inside here, that's where the e-brake contacts, so you want to get in there too. Love that stuff. People spend all that money on drugs, and you can go pick up a thing of this for $5 and sniff that. There you go, we got it made right there. All right, look at that, goopy. So now that that's clean, we're going to stick it on the hub, and then we'll go ahead and do the brake pads. Oh, and by the way, there's a little rubber grommet in your old rotor that 99.9% of the time your new one will not have, like this one here. That is an inspection hole. We need to plug that, otherwise you're going to get all kinds of shmoo in your e-brake. So take the old one off, it just pops out, and then pop her right into the new one. Yeah, I keep having to take my gloves off, so might as well keep them off for the rest of this, I guess. So here you have your rotor now, sorry, caliper. This is the mounting portion of it. This part mounts to here. The brain fart, I'll remember that later, mounts to there. So right here you've got two 14 mils. You want to take these guys off and separate the caliper from the mount. Just like this. This part's going to take a bit of wiggling, so I'm going to have to put the camera down and use two hands. But I'm going to wiggle this guy off like this. So I might be able to do it with one hand. Oh yeah, we're good. Go on here. Yeah. Just about. Boy, you're all very patient. There we go. That's off. So that's got your slide pins in it. So while you got this off, I'm going to check those guys. Those two were working perfectly. They're not seized. This is your caliper, and that's your caliper piston. Now you want to take a look at it, see if it's wet. This one's not wet. It's just real dirty. Got all that sort of nasty brake dust on it. Don't be breathing none of that. Might have asbestos in it, unless you live in Australia. In which case you guys don't get any of the good stuff, but here in Canada we sure do. So these are the old brake shoes. You can see that yeah, they're pretty worn down. It's unusual, but the side of the piston's actually got a little bit more meat on it than the outside, which is usually this side goes first. But what we're gonna do is pull these guys out. I'm gonna have to get a little more physical because these are gonna be a bit sticky. So we'll pull these guys out. And then I want you guys to clean these up here. Nice and clean. You can use a little bit of sandpaper or wire wheel, wire brush, and some brake cleaner. Clean up the stainless portions. Unless your brake pads come with new hardware, in which case replace everything. If you got new parts, put them in. These pads are cheap. Just came with the pads, nothing else. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll be right back. So it might not be obvious, so I'm going to show you. In case you're wondering how you're supposed to get these new shoes in here, it's just like that. Pads. New pads. It's 7 o'clock. I got a late start today, and I want to get this done because I don't want to drive an hour to come back here tomorrow. Anyways, that's how you do it. Stick that one in there, stick the other side in, and then we'll get to the next step. Alright, once your new shoes are on, you can reinstall everything and torque everything. There's the two bolts on the back there that are both 17 millimeters. And you know, if you wanted, probably it might be easier for some of you. You can put all this back on first and then put your new pads in. That might be easy for some of you guys. I did it this way because that's just the way I did it. So the next thing you want to do is we're going to have to press the piston in on this guy here. So take an old brake shoe, slap that sucker on there like that. I'm going to take my my 5-inch C-clamp here, And we'll back it off so that we can get it on. And we will put that on there like this. Sorry for the shoddy camera work. We're doing this one-handed. Holy, real professional. Should have brought a tripod, eh? Alright, now that it's on there like that, you want to squeeze it until it doesn't go in anymore. So this shouldn't be hard to do. Like, I'm just going to turn this a little bit by hand. You can see it's going in already. Super easy. And it's easy. If you have a lot of trouble putting this piston back in here, and the inside shoe, the piston side, was worn right out, and say the other side looks brand new, you might have a seized caliper, in which case you will need to replace the caliper. I won't get into doing that, but you would unbolt it here. I believe that's a, I think that's a 12 millimeter bolt, if memory serves. You would take that off, bolt up your new caliper, and then you would go through the process of bleeding this one, or bleeding the new one. So from the front of the vehicle here, while we're doing that, we've already pretty much hit maximum capacity on the reservoir here. So I don't do this, but some people do, and I'll tell you why not to do it. Some people see that their brake fluid is at minimum, right? So that would be this line right here. And go, oh shit, I better put some brake fluid in there. Unless you got a leak somewhere in here, don't do that, all right? It's not necessary. Because when you or somebody goes to do the brake pads in here, and they say they're going to do all four, and they reset those calipers to 0, this thing's going to overflow, or you're going to have to take fluid out of it, which is a massive pain in the ass. This fluid is lovely in color, so I was going to consider bleeding the entire system, but it was done fairly recently, apparently, by someone other than me. So, we're going to back that caliper back down, squeeze all the fluid out of it to 0, and we're going to see if this gets any fuller than it already is. I don't think it will, and I think once we pump the brakes and reset, I've done all the brakes in this vehicle today, front and back, and I haven't touched the brake pedal yet. So once we reset everything and compress it, this should, if nobody's ever put fluid in it, return to factory max. So let's see how that goes. Alright, I've reset it to 0, and you can see the fluid level is about 1/4 of an inch from the lip there. I haven't removed any fluid yet, and I'll show you what the caliper looks like when it's reset to the 0 position, just like that. So it doesn't go flat or flush with this. This just sits just like that. I got some schmoo in there. So now what we're going to do, take the caliper, stick her on here like this. Might need a little bit of wiggling. The part that can be a little tricky, especially if you leave the bolts in like I did, is press these guys down. There you go, like that. And then we'll take the bolt out of the bottom. It's getting late and I need coffee. Just like this. There you go. Like that. Turn the bolts in. Put those guys in. Torque them to spec. And then we'll put the wheel back on. So I'll get this done. I'll be right back. Alright, it's all back together. We got the keeper for the brake line. All the nuts and bolts are back in. Everything's torqued. We're going to jack the car up off of the jack stand there and put the tire back on and torque the tire, and then that's it. I'm not going to cover any of that because if you don't know how to take a tire off, you shouldn't be doing this job. And that's not a joke. So, I do have one other thing to say. Older fellows, when you take your retaining clip off of the piston here, you know, you might have a little bit trouble with expanding your cylinder. So, you might want to try talking dirty to it. You could go online, Google boobs, show your phone with some boobs on there, show it to this guy, pop right up, good as new. No, but in all seriousness, thanks for watching. That concludes today's video. Hopefully I have explained enough of this to make somebody's life a little easier, but just a heads up, I'm not a mechanic. I'm just a guy with some tools and some time, trying to help out a buddy and make a little bit of the green stuff in the meantime. So, you know, follow this tutorial if you want. I'm not a mechanic. Do it at your own risk. If something goes wrong, don't go crying in the comments, because nothing I can do about it. Anyways, good luck to you, sir and or madam, and we'll talk at you later. See you in the next video. Bye.